In this video, we would be looking at a very exciting game happened between the former world champion versus the current world champion, Ding Liren versus Magnus Carlsen. And this game was played in the Norwich Chess 2024. It's the classical tournament, and the time control here is 2 hours for the first 40 moves, and after 40 moves, both the player will get 30-second increment. And if the classical game ends in a draw, we will go into the Armageddon section. So already the game is full with excitement. I don't want to waste any further time, so let's start. So we have the classical game. Ding plays 1d4, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, d5, and now we have the Catalan opening. And after g3, Magnus spent around 15 minutes on his clock. Most probably he is gathering all his old preparation. He played bishop e7, bishop g2, short castle, and now he played the move c6, a very solid setup. Now queen to c2, the main move, b6. So after b6, the idea is to put the bishop to b7, knight d7, rook c8, and then play c5. I would say a very solid setup to play with the black pieces. Bishop f4, bishop b7, rook d1, knight d7, knight to e5, and already after knight e5, Magnus played knight to h5, attacking the bishop on f4. White have to pull back the bishop, or else black is simply going to capture the bishop, and black would be having a very comfortable position. Bishop falls back, and here Magnus goes back with the knight, and here bishop f4. So basically both the players repeated the position, and we have a draw. So yeah, the classical game ended in a draw. So now let's move on to the Armageddon section. Okay, so we have the Armageddon section. So basically Ding Liren is playing with the white pieces. So if he wants to win against Magnus, he has to win this game with the white pieces. He's having 10 minutes on his clock, whereas Magnus is having 7 minutes on his clock with the black pieces. And Magnus just needs a draw to secure the victory. So already a very interesting game. None of the players is having any increment. After the 40 move, both the player will get 1 second increment each. So we have c4 by Ding, e5 by Magnus, g3, knight to f6, bishop g2, h6, knight to c3, bishop to b4. You can also say it as reverse Sicilian, or I would say the English opening. Bishop b4, e4. So a very solid setup. e4, c4. But the point here is the d4 square is extremely weak now. So d6, knight to e2, bishop to c5, h3, a5, short castle, knight c6, d3, and already a very typical maneuver just like Magnus. He plays knight to h7. He realizes that the knight on f6 is not really doing much, so it's better to put the knight at a best square. So knight h7, knight f8, knight e6, f5, and now we have simply knight to d4, putting the knight at the best square. Knight takes, rook to b1, bishop to d7, completing his development, b3, b5, and now we have the move queen to g4. If white tries to capture the pawn, after takes, d3 is a bit weak, and I would say practically speaking up, black is much more comfortable. Going back, I personally feel f6 would have been a much more interesting move. You are just opening up the king side, but after g6 not really much is happening, but I personally feel that f6 is giving definitely much more space on the king side to the white side. Okay, but instead we have queen to g4, king f8 in order to defend the g7 square. King f8 idea is a very typical idea, commonly played in these types of setups. If you try to play something like queen to f6, it's already a blunder after knight d5 because it's game over. Yeah, so you kind of have to play king f8. If you try to go for something else like maybe rook g8, it's still not really working after bishop into h6 coming up. You can't really take because the rook is hanging. So that is the whole reason king f8, a very typical maneuver, extremely fine. And now we have queen to h5. Basically the point here is you can't really play f6 because the queen is hanging. So you have to move the queen. And now white is really... idea is to simply push the pawn to f6. Because now if you capture the pawn or push the pawn, basically white is simply going to capture the h6 pawn, giving a check. So that's the whole reason after queen h5, black have to play f6. Queen to d1, b4, attacking the knight, knight to a4, and now we have bishop to a7. Now many of the players would like to capture the knight because it's close possession. We should try to capture the knight, but guys, here it's a bad move. I would say it's a fine move, but basically after takes, Like, if somehow the white light square bishop reaches to h5, you are already having too much light square weaknesses. So that was the whole reason. At the place of capturing the knight, which is already on the corner of the board, instead of capturing the knight, he simply pulls back the bishop, which is an extremely good move. Bishop to f3. And now here's my question. Pause the video and try to find the moves that happened in the game. Okay, it's also the best move. So if you found the move knight into f3, it's the best move. Now, using some logic, it looks like white is already having the pawns at the light squares. So definitely the f3 bishop should be bad. So why if the strong knight on d4 is actually capturing the bishop on f3? What is the whole idea? So basically, as I say, that black is having all his pawns at the dark squares, which makes the light squares extremely weak. So white's idea is already to play bishop to h5. So that's why black decided to capture the bishop. And now, first of all, black is having the bishop. Second, now white can't really take advantage of any white square weaknesses that black is having. So it's already good. Queen e8, g4, bishop to d4, centralizing the bishop, bishop e3. And now, Ding's idea is to simply remove the bishop advantage that Magnus is having. So Magnus simply took the bishop, and now he realizes that the knight is much more stronger than the bishop. So it's better to trade it off. To be true, like, even if it does not really capture the knight in this position, it's still extremely fine. But Magnus' idea, I believe, is to simply take and play c5. Like, even if it doesn't capture the knight in this position, it's extremely fine because black's pawn are already on the dark squares. So their pawns are already covering the dark squares, whereas the bishop is covering all the light squares. So there are no real weaknesses that black is having. And still, Magnus took and played c5. And now it's already a block position. It's already heading most likely towards the draw. We have h4 by Ding, king e7, rook to h3, queen c2, rook g1, and now you can already realize that the only break that white is having is to play g5, or else the position is dead equal, it's a draw. Though it's still a draw, but still. King g2. Now before opening the position on the king side, Ding wants to first put the king onto the b3, which is the best square for the king, and that's exactly what Ding did. And now he tried to shuffle his rooks and queens here and there on the king side, but like, if he wants to win, he has to make a breakthrough with g5. If he plays h5, it's a complete draw, and Magnus just needs a draw. So rook h3. So Magnus is just extremely chill guy. The point here is, the moment Ding opens with g5, Magnus is simply going to trade it with the h pawn, and now he's having the full control of the h5. That is the reason the position is dead equal. And now we have rook h1, queen g8, both the players are shuffling the pieces, and after queen g3, Magnus played a typical king s6 move. The idea is very interesting. The point here is, whenever there would be trade on the king side, when the queen reaches on g5, if the king would be on b6, there would be some ideas with queen to d8 check. So the idea is best to put the king at the light square. So that's why after g5 takes. And now, here Magnus played queen to h1. If the king would have been on b6, Ding could have started already giving some checks with queen to d8. At the place of king b6, the king is actually on a6, and now there are no real checks, and Magnus is the one who's going to start delivering checks to Ding's king. But after king c2, we have queen a1, and now we have check, takes, check. Magnus captured all the pawn, but yeah, he can't really stop giving checks, or else Ding is going to start grabbing some pawns. So we have e4, but now queen to b7, and now checks are coming up. So here Magnus simply gave some checks, and both the players agreed to a draw, and Magnus is the winner of the round number 1 against Ding Liren by securing a draw with the black pieces in the Armageddon section. So basically this was the first game that was happened between Magnus Carlsen versus Ding Liren, first classical game since Ding became the world champion. So already a very well interesting game. I personally felt the classical section was much more interesting because the opening that Magnus chose to play against Dingleren was quite interesting to play against the Catalan. You can also check out this particular game. It was very interesting. If you really want to have a solid repertoire against the Catalan opening to play with the black pieces, I think what Magnus did was pretty sensible. So yeah, you can also go and just try out that solid opening. It's a very good game. So yeah, if you learned anything new today, then make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. It's free for you, but it helps us to motivate to make more videos like this. And if you had fun, so that's nice. So I'm going to see you soon. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.